He'd been answering tech support calls at a mid-sized investment firm in Boston for 7 years, patiently helping employees reset passwords and troubleshoot printer issues. Just a quiet guy in his 30s who worked in the basement IT department, always polite on the phone, never complaining about the repetitive questions. Until 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when the company's entire network came under a sophisticated cyber attack, and in the critical hours that followed, everyone discovered that their patient help desk technician wasn't just good at fixing computers, he was a former NSA Cyber Warfare specialist who had spent 6 years defending critical infrastructure from nation-state attackers, and he still knew exactly how to fight back when digital warfare came to corporate America. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this intense story of hidden expertise and digital combat, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who continue defending in ways most people never see. David Park started his shift at the Meridian Capital Group help desk at 11 p.m., covering the overnight hours when the office was mostly empty, except for a few analysts working on time-sensitive projects. At 34 years old, David had settled into a comfortable routine: answer support tickets, perform scheduled system maintenance, monitor network security alerts, and mostly just be available if anyone needed technical help during the quiet hours. The job was far from glamorous. Most of his coworkers didn't even know his name, just that IT would fix their problems eventually. The pay was decent but not exceptional. The work was repetitive, often boring, occasionally frustrating when users couldn't follow simple instructions. But David appreciated the simplicity after years of high-stress work that he never discussed with his civilian colleagues. What nobody at Meridian Capital knew was that before David Park became an overnight IT help desk technician in Boston, he had been David Park, NSA Cyber Operations Specialist, assigned to Cyber Command conducting defensive and offensive cyber operations against sophisticated adversaries. 6 years of active duty protecting critical infrastructure, tracking advanced persistent threats, and engaging in digital warfare that the public would never hear about because it happened in networks and systems that officially didn't exist. David had left the NSA 3 years ago, burned out from the constant pressure, the classified stress that he couldn't discuss with friends or family, and the knowledge that every day brought new threats from adversaries who were getting more sophisticated. He'd wanted something simpler, less intense, where he could use his technical skills without the weight of national security on his shoulders. Corporate IT help desk had seemed perfect. Technical work without the stress, normal hours, problems that could actually be solved, rather than the endless cat and mouse of nation-state cyber warfare. For 3 years, it had been exactly what David needed. That Tuesday night started normally. David logged into his workstation in the basement IT office, reviewed the day's support tickets, and began his routine system checks. The building was quiet, only 4 people working late on the trading floor, and a couple of executives in their offices finishing up for international market openings. At 2:47 a.m., David's security monitoring dashboard lit up with alerts that made his blood run cold. Not the normal alerts about failed login attempts or suspicious emails. These were alerts indicating active network intrusion, lateral movement through systems, and data exfiltration attempts, all the signatures of a sophisticated coordinated attack. David's hands moved across his keyboard with practice speed, pulling up network logs, tracking the intrusion vectors, analyzing the attack patterns. What he saw made him realize this wasn't some random ransomware attempt or opportunistic hacker. This was a professional operation using advanced techniques, zero-day exploits, custom malware, and tactics that indicated either organized crime or state-sponsored actors. The attackers had gained initial access through a compromised vendor credential, moved laterally through the network by exploiting a vulnerability that shouldn't have existed in their patched systems, and were currently attempting to access the firm's trading algorithms and client financial data. If successful, it would mean catastrophic losses for the company and potentially millions of dollars stolen from client accounts. David's NSA training kicked in automatically. This wasn't just an IT problem anymore. This was active cyber warfare happening in real time, and he was the only person in the building qualified to fight it. He grabbed his phone and called his supervisor, James, who lived 20 minutes away and definitely wasn't expecting a call at 2:50 a.m. "James, it's David. We have a critical security incident. Network intrusion, sophisticated attack, active right now. I need authorization to implement emergency countermeasures." James, groggy and confused, tried to process what he was hearing. "What? Can't this wait until morning? Just shut down the affected systems?" "Sir, If I shut down now, they'll know we detected them and they'll activate their persistence mechanisms. We'll spend weeks cleaning them out. I need to engage actively while I can still track them. This is way above my normal authorization level, but I promise you I know what I'm doing." Something in David's tone cut through James's sleepiness. "Okay, do what you need to do. I'm coming in." David hung up and went to work. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't an IT help desk technician. He was a cyber warfare specialist engaging a hostile actor in his network. The next 2 hours were intense. David isolated the compromised systems without alerting the attackers that he'd detected them. He deployed custom honeypot systems, decoy targets loaded with fake but convincing data to distract the attackers and keep them engaged while he analyzed their tools and techniques. He traced their command and control servers, identified their malware signatures, and began systematically cutting off their access while making it look like normal network activity. This was the kind of work David had done at NSA, but with much higher stakes and much more sophisticated adversaries. Corporate systems weren't hardened like government networks, but the principles were the same: understand the threat, control the battlefield, and eliminate the adversary's access while preserving evidence for later analysis. By 4:15 a.m., David had successfully isolated the attackers in a contained segment of the network where they couldn't do real damage but didn't realize they'd been contained. He'd identified all their persistence mechanisms, the backdoors and malware they'd planted to maintain access even if discovered, and was preparing to simultaneously eliminate all of them. James arrived at 4:30 a.m., along with the company's Chief Information Security Officer, Maria Santos, who had been called in for the emergency. They found David in the basement IT office, surrounded by multiple monitors showing network traffic, malware analysis, and attack timelines that looked more like military operations than corporate IT. "David, what's happening?" Maria asked, trying to make sense of the technical displays. David didn't look up from his screens, hands still moving rapidly across keyboards. "Sophisticated intrusion attempt. Initial access through compromised vendor credentials approximately 6 hours ago. Attackers used what appears to be a zero-day exploit in our VPN infrastructure. That's a vulnerability that even the vendor doesn't know exists yet. They've been conducting reconnaissance and positioning for data exfiltration. I've contained them, but I need about 20 more minutes to complete the remediation." Maria stared at him. David, you're a help desk technician. How are you handling a sophisticated cyber attack?" "I used to do cybersecurity work before this job. Government sector. Some of the training stuck with me." Government sector was putting it mildly, but David couldn't exactly explain that he'd spent 6 years at NSA conducting cyber operations against nation-state actors. Maria watched as David executed the final phase of his counter-operation. Simultaneously across the network, all the attackers' backdoors and persistence mechanisms were eliminated. Their command and control connections were severed, and the fake data they'd been stealing from the honeypot systems was corrupted with tracking signatures that would help identify where it went. "Done," David said finally, leaning back in his chair. "They're out. All access points closed, all malware removed, and I've collected about 40 gigabytes of forensic evidence, including their tools, techniques, and some identifying information that law enforcement will find useful." James looked at the screens full of technical data he didn't fully understand. "David, how did you know how to do all this?" David was quiet for a moment, then said simply, "NSA, Cyber Command, 6 years. I worked on the defense side, protecting critical infrastructure from exactly this kind of attack. When I left, I wanted something simpler, but apparently the universe had other plans tonight." The silence that followed was profound. David Park, who they'd known for 3 years as the patient guy who reset passwords and fixed printer jams, had just single-handedly defended their company from what Maria was already recognizing as a potentially catastrophic breach. Over the next few hours, as the rest of the IT and security team arrived and began processing what had happened, the full picture emerged. The attack had been sophisticated enough that it would have succeeded at most companies. The attackers had used techniques and tools that suggested either organized crime or state-sponsored actors, possibly targeting the firm's trading algorithms or client financial data for theft or espionage. David's intervention hadn't just prevented a breach, it had turned the attack into an intelligence collection opportunity. The forensic evidence he'd gathered would help law enforcement and the cybersecurity community understand and defend against these techniques. "David," Maria said as they sat in a conference room around 8 a.m. after the immediate crisis had passed, "I need to understand something. You've been working help desk for 3 years. You have skills that most CISOs would kill to have on their security team. Why didn't you ever mention your background?" David looked tired. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the familiar post-incident exhaustion was setting in. Because I left that world deliberately. The work at NSA was important, but it was also intense, stressful, and classified in ways that made it hard to have a normal life. I wanted something simpler. Help desk work let me use technical skills without the pressure. But you just handled pressure that would break most security professionals. That's different. That was a clear threat with clear objectives. At NSA, the threats never stop, the pressure never ends, and you can't talk to anyone about it. This was intense, but it was finite. There's a difference. The company's CEO, Richard Brennan, arrived at 9 a.m. and was briefed on the overnight incident. His first action was to personally thank David. His second was to ask Maria to assess what changes needed to be made to their security posture. "Mr. Park," Brennan said, "I understand you're not interested in leaving help desk, but we need to talk about how to properly utilize your expertise. What you did last night saved this company from potentially catastrophic losses. We can't afford to have someone with your skills answering password reset calls." David sighed. He'd known this conversation was coming. "Sir, I appreciate that, but I chose help desk specifically because it's low stress. I respect what security teams do, but I can't go back to that kind of pressure full time." "What if we created a hybrid role?" Maria suggested. "You continue with help desk as your primary work, but you're also our emergency response specialist for critical incidents. You'd help design our security architecture, train the team, but you wouldn't be on the front lines unless absolutely necessary." David considered this. It was more than he'd wanted, but after last night he understood that completely ignoring his background wasn't realistic. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but David, I want you to know what you did last night wasn't just technical expertise. It was dedication to protecting people. That matters." Over the following days, word spread through Meridian Capital about what had happened. David Park, the quiet help desk guy who most employees had never really noticed, was now the person who had defended the company from a major cyber attack. Some people wanted to hear the technical details, others just wanted to say thank you, and a few seemed uncomfortable that the person fixing their printer issues had such an intense background. David ultimately accepted a modified role, still primarily help desk, but with responsibilities for security architecture, incident response training, and serving as the company's emergency cyber defense specialist if needed. It wasn't the simple life he'd imagined, but it was a balance between using his expertise and maintaining boundaries that protected his well-being. About 2 weeks after the incident, David received an encrypted email from his former supervisor at NSA. The message was brief. "Saw the forensic data you collected from the Meridian incident. Excellent work. The techniques you documented are helping us track a larger campaign. Some missions continue even after you think they're over. Stay safe." David read the message and realized something important. He'd left NSA wanting to escape cyber warfare, thinking he could put that world behind him completely. But the skills he'd learned, the awareness he'd developed, the ability to defend against sophisticated threats, these weren't things he could turn off, nor should he. The difference was choice. At NSA, he'd been required to engage in the constant battle against nation-state attackers, with the weight of national security driving every decision. Now he could use those same skills to protect a company, help train others, and engage in cyber defense on his own terms without the classified pressure that had burned him out. One afternoon, David was helping a new employee set up her workstation when she asked the question that people had been asking frequently since the incident. "Is it true you used to work for the NSA, like actual cybersecurity against hackers and stuff?" David smiled slightly. "Yeah, that's true. Different kind of work than this, but same basic principles. Protect systems, help people stay safe, fix problems before they become crises." "Do you miss it, the exciting stuff?" David thought about that question. "Sometimes I miss the team, the sense of mission. But excitement isn't always good. That night with the cyber attack was exciting, but it was also stressful and exhausting. Most days I'd rather help you set up your email than fight off Chinese hackers at 3 a.m. The employee laughed. "Fair enough, but it's good to know you're here if the Chinese hackers show up. Or Russian, or Iranian, or just well-organized criminals. They're all out there." David finished configuring her security settings. "But that's why we have good defenses, trained staff, and yes, sometimes former NSA people answering help desk calls. You're protected." David continued his hybrid role at Meridian Capital. He still answered support tickets, fixed technical problems, and helped employees with everyday IT issues. But he also designed security improvements, trained the IT team in threat detection, and served as the company's rapid response specialist for critical security incidents. The work wasn't simple anymore, but it had purpose. He was using skills earned in service to national security to protect a company and its employees. It wasn't the same mission he'd had at NSA, but it was a mission nonetheless, defending against digital threats that most people never saw, but that could cause real harm. 3 months after the incident, the FBI's cybercrime unit invited David to brief other companies on the attack techniques he'd documented. As he stood in front of a room full of corporate security professionals, explaining how sophisticated attackers operated and how to defend against them, David realized he'd found a new way to serve. He wasn't fighting nation-state cyber warfare campaigns anymore. He was helping civilian organizations understand and defend against threats they weren't equipped to handle alone. It was teaching, protecting, and using expertise earned in government service to strengthen private sector defenses. The most important thing to understand, David told the assembled security professionals, is that these attackers are professional, patient, and sophisticated. They're not looking for quick wins. They're building persistent access and waiting for opportunities. Your defense can't be reactive. It has to be proactive, layered, and informed by understanding how these adversaries think. Someone raised their hand. How do you learn to think like these attackers? David smiled slightly. In my case, I spent 6 years at NSA studying them. But you can learn by sharing information, analyzing incidents, and understanding that cyber defense isn't about perfect security. It's about making your organization a harder target than the one next door. It's about detection and response, not just prevention. After the briefing, several security professionals approached David asking if he did consulting work. Within 6 months, David had developed a side business advising companies on cybersecurity. Not full-time, not the constant pressure he'd wanted to escape, but a way to share expertise that could make the digital world a little safer. David Park still works at Meridian Capital. He still starts his overnight shift at 11 p.m., still answers support tickets, still helps employees with their technical problems. But now everyone knows that the patient help desk guy carries skills that most security professionals never develop, and that when digital threats emerge, they have someone who learned cyber warfare at the highest levels. Because true service doesn't end with a discharge or resignation from government work. It continues in whatever form allows someone to use their training to protect others. For David Park, that means defending corporate networks with the same dedication he once brought to protecting national infrastructure, teaching others to recognize threats, and being ready when sophisticated adversaries target the organizations that employ, serve, and support everyday people. The battlefield is different. Servers instead of weapons systems, corporations instead of critical infrastructure, profit instead of national security. But the mission remains the same. Defend against those who would cause harm, use expertise to protect the vulnerable, and ensure that the digital world remains safe for the people who depend on it. So tell me, have you ever discovered that someone in a mundane job had extraordinary expertise? An IT person, a technician, someone whose background explained their exceptional competence. Share their story in the comments below, because these are the stories that matter. Veterans of digital warfare who never stopped defending, who found new ways to protect, who discovered that the mission to keep systems and people safe doesn't end, it just evolves. If this story moved you, subscribe to The Human Stories for more accounts of quiet heroism and specialists who continue their missions in unexpected ways. Until next time, remember that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they sit in basement IT offices at 3 a.m., using skills earned defending nations to protect companies, and they're ready to engage in digital combat whenever the threats emerge.